Have you ever made a choice so terrible that it changed your whole life? A choice that happened so fast you didn't even realize what you were doing until it was too late. That's what happened to me, and I'm going to tell you about it because sometimes we learn the most important lessons from our biggest mistakes. My name is Elena, and this is the hardest story I've ever had to share. It's about trust, about making wrong choices, and about how one afternoon can change everything you thought you knew about yourself. Let me take you back to where I lived. Picture a beautiful old farmhouse sitting on a huge piece of land in upstate New York. The house had tall ceilings, giant windows that looked out at the forest, and a porch that wrapped all the way around. When the sun set, the sky turned orange and purple like a painting. My partner Marcus and I had bought this house 5 years before my story begins. We fixed it up together, keeping the old wooden beams and stone fireplace, but making everything else new and comfortable. From almost every room, you could see trees and nature. It felt like the perfect place, like nothing bad could ever happen there. Marcus and I have been together for 8 years. We met at a work conference when neither of us was looking for love. He was recovering from a divorce that had made him sad and careful about relationships. I was tired from a long relationship that had ended. We didn't fall in love quickly like in the movies. Instead, we slowly built trust with each other. We both understood what it felt like to be hurt, so we were careful with each other's hearts. Marcus had an important job in real estate, which meant he traveled a lot. Every month, he would be gone for about a week, sometimes longer. I knew this from the beginning, and I told myself I was okay with it. But here's something I learned. When someone you love is gone a lot, it creates empty space. And sometimes, in that empty space, problems can grow. I worked as a consultant helping nonprofits raise money. My job was flexible, which meant I could organize my schedule around Marcus's trips. When he was away, I focused on my work. When he came home, we spent time together. It seemed like a good plan, but looking back, I see that I was always adjusting my life to fit his schedule. The day everything changed was a Saturday in early October. The weather was starting to get cooler. Mornings were crisp and cold, but afternoons were still warm. Marcus left that morning at 6 o'clock to drive north for a work project. He would be gone for a week, maybe longer. He kissed me goodbye before the sun came up, like he always did. I was mostly asleep, but I remember smelling his cologne and coffee. I thought, like I always did, that I should wake up properly to say goodbye. But I never did. I always fell back asleep. By 8 o'clock that morning, I was alone in the house. But this time, the quiet felt different. It felt like something was about to happen, though I couldn't explain what. I decided to organize our bedroom, something I'd been planning to do for weeks. Marcus's closet was always messy, and my side was cluttered with clothes from different seasons. I'd put on an old comfortable sweater and leggings, tied my hair back and started working. I played my favorite music through the bedroom speaker, soft piano music that helped me focus. Now I need to tell you about Thomas. He was Marcus's son from a marriage long ago, before I knew Marcus. That marriage only lasted 3 years, and Marcus had been very sad when it ended, especially because his ex-wife moved far away with their young son. Marcus and Thomas stayed in touch, but distance made their relationship difficult. By the time my story happens, Thomas was 27 years old. He had just finished college and was getting ready to start a graduate program in London to study environmental science. The program would start in late fall, so Thomas asked Marcus if he could stay with us for 3 weeks before moving to another country. Marcus was excited about this idea because he wanted to spend time with his son before Thomas moved so far away. I supported the idea because I wanted to make Marcus happy, even though Thomas and I had never been very close. Thomas had arrived on a Wednesday evening, 3 days before this Saturday. He was quiet and thoughtful. He had his father's dark hair and sharp face, but his eyes were lighter, more hazel-colored. He was tall and fit in a natural way. He spoke gently and seemed to really listen when people talked. He was the kind of person you might not notice much, which is partly why what happened was so shocking to both of us. The morning Marcus left, Thomas was still sleeping. By the time he woke up, I had been working on the bedroom for several hours. I heard him making breakfast in the kitchen. I kept working upstairs, thinking he probably wanted to be alone. Around 10 o'clock, I heard footsteps on the stairs. Thomas appeared in the bedroom doorway. I was standing on a small step stool, reaching up to a high shelf in Marcus's closet, pulling down boxes of old things. When I heard him, I turned around and almost fell off the stool. "Oh, hey," I said, catching my balance. "I didn't expect to see you up here." He looked uncomfortable, like he wasn't sure if he should bother me. I heard the music and wondered if you needed help with anything. "You've been up here for a while." I climbed down from the stool and smiled at him. "That's nice of you to offer." "I'm just organizing. Nothing too hard." He was quiet for a moment. He was wearing a grey shirt and dark jeans, and his hair was still a little wet from his shower. "I've been staying in my room too much since I got here," he said. "I feel like I should be doing something instead of just hiding in the guest room." "You don't have to do anything," I told him. "You're a guest. But if you really want to help, I won't say no. These boxes need to come down and be sorted. Some stuff goes to the basement for storage, and some stuff should probably be donated." So Thomas stayed and helped me. We worked together for the next few hours, moving through the organizing project step by step. He was efficient and thoughtful, carefully suggesting where things should go. We talked while we worked. He told me about his graduate program, how excited and nervous he felt about moving to London. I asked him questions about what he wanted to study and what he planned to do after graduation. The conversation was easy because we were busy with our hands, so there was less pressure to always have something interesting to say. It was a pleasant morning, nothing unusual. Then, around 1 o'clock, everything changed in a way I never expected. I was standing on the step stool again, reaching toward the very top shelf where we kept things we rarely used. I was trying to move a large storage box, and I wasn't paying enough attention to my balance. My left foot slipped on the edge of the stool. For just a second, I felt myself falling. That scary feeling when gravity takes over. But I never hit the ground. Thomas had been organizing things on the floor behind me. He moved incredibly fast, almost like instinct. His arms came around my waist and caught me before I could fall. I found myself pressed against him, his chest against my back, his arms solid and protective around me. We both froze like that for several seconds, processing what had almost happened, and what was actually happening instead. "Jesus," he breathed, his voice close to my ear. "You scared me." I turned around in his arms, and this is the moment when everything changed. When I turned to face him, our faces were very close. I could see small details, the tiny scar on his chin, the way his hazel eyes reflected the light from the window, the slight stubble on his jaw. He was looking at me with an intensity that surprised me. And in that moment, something fundamental shifted between us. I felt a jolt of attraction so sudden and powerful that it knocked the breath out of me. It wasn't something I had been thinking about or trying to deny. It just appeared in that instant, like a door, opening to a room I didn't know existed. What made it more complicated was that I could see the exact same realization happening on his face. He felt it too. We both recognized it at the same time. I should have stepped away. Everything I believed about right and wrong screamed at me to step away. But I didn't, and he didn't. We stood there with his arms still loosely around me, both of us looking at each other. And in that moment, I made a terrible choice. It wasn't a thought-out decision. It was more like allowing something to happen that I should have stopped. I let my hands rest on his shoulders instead of pushing away. Elena, he said quietly. And the way he said my name, with such uncertainty and wonder, made something inside me crack open. I didn't answer with words. Instead, I let the small distance between us close. I leaned forward, and he met me halfway. When his lips touched mine, it was gentle at first, almost hesitant, as though either of us might come to our senses and pull away. But that didn't happen. The kiss deepened and became more urgent. His hands moved from my waist to my hair, pulling me closer. My hands moved from his shoulders to his back. The step stool was completely forgotten. The boxes were forgotten. Everything was forgotten except for the overwhelming feeling of being close to him and the complete wrongness and rightness of what we were doing at the same time. What happened next is something I'm deeply ashamed of. We made a terrible mistake, one that I can never take back. We betrayed Marcus in the worst way possible. When it was over, we lay there in the afternoon light, both of us breathing heavily, both of us trying to understand what had just happened. The classical music was still playing softly from the speaker, ridiculously peaceful given what we'd done. I could feel his heart beating fast. And then reality came crashing back like a wave of ice water. "Oh my God," I whispered. "Oh my God, what did we just do?" Thomas was silent for several long moments. I could feel the change in his body, the tension that replaced any relaxation. "We made a mistake," he said, though his voice suggested he wasn't entirely convinced. "We made a really serious mistake." I sat up, pulling away from him, suddenly aware of everything. I grabbed my sweater and pulled it on with shaking hands. "This can't happen again," I said, though I was speaking to myself as much as to him. "This is insane. This is completely insane." Thomas sat up too, and I could see the conflict on his face. He ran his hand through his hair. "I know," he said quietly. "I know. I wasn't planning for that to happen. I didn't come in here expecting anything." "Neither did I said, which was true. But that didn't make it better. That didn't make it less of a betrayal of Marcus, of our relationship, of the trust he'd placed in both of us. This is worse because we didn't plan it. We just lost control. I stood up and straightened my clothes, feeling like my whole body had changed somehow. "We need to move past this," I said, and I could hear my voice shaking. "We need to pretend it didn't happen." Thomas looked up at me, and I could see pain in his eyes. "Can we do that?" he asked. "Can we actually pretend?" "We have to," I replied. But even as I said it, I knew it was going to be impossible. The rest of that day was one of the most difficult days I've ever lived through. We carefully avoided each other. Thomas went to the guest room and closed the door. I stayed in the master bedroom, sitting on the edge of the bed for a very long time, staring out the window at the woods, trying to understand how my life had changed so completely in maybe 30 minutes. I did what many people do when they feel terrible anxiety. I tried to act normal. I showered, washing away any physical evidence of what we'd done. I changed into completely different clothes. I went downstairs and started preparing dinner, even though neither of us had asked for food, and neither of us would probably want to eat. I needed something to do. Something that required my attention. Something that might trick my mind into believing everything was fine. That evening, Marcus called. He did this when he was traveling, usually around dinner time, to check how my day had been. I answered the phone and somehow kept my voice steady. I told him about my day, that I'd been organizing the bedroom, that Thomas had helped, that we'd had a productive afternoon. I didn't tell him the one true thing that had happened. I didn't tell him I'd betrayed him in the worst way possible. "That's good that Thomas is helping out," Marcus said, and I could hear the smile in his voice. "He seems like he's been stressed since he got there. I'm glad he's connecting with you." Those words hit me like a punch. I wanted to tell him the truth right then, to confess everything. But I didn't. I made some excuse about needing to check on dinner, and got off the phone quickly. Thomas came out of the guest room when I called him for dinner. We sat at the dining table in a silence that felt suffocating. I moved food around on my plate, pretending to eat. Thomas did the same. Neither of us looked directly at each other. The comfortable companionship we developed during the morning was completely gone, replaced by tension so thick it felt like you could touch it. After dinner, I cleaned up alone while Thomas went back to the guest room. I stood at the sink washing dishes, looking out the window into the growing darkness, and I felt something I can only describe as despair. I had done something I couldn't undo. I had crossed a line that no amount of pretending would let me uncross. That night, I lay in bed next to Marcus's empty side of the bed, and I didn't sleep at all. I stared at the ceiling for hours, my mind going in circles of guilt, shame, and a confusing longing for something I shouldn't want. The days that followed were some of the most emotionally complicated I've ever experienced. Thomas had planned to stay for 3 weeks, and there were still 2.5 weeks remaining. Every single day felt impossible. Every moment in the house required me to constantly manage my emotions and awareness. We fell into a pattern of avoiding each other, broken only by moments when we couldn't avoid each other. When we ran into each other in the kitchen or hallway, there was an electricity between us that neither of us talked about. When our eyes met, I could see him fighting the same internal battle I was fighting. Sometimes I'd catch him watching me, his expression hard to read, but his eyes filled with something I recognized because I felt it too, a longing for something we both understood was wrong. Marcus called regularly and seemed happy. His project was going well. He asked me how I was doing, how Thomas was adjusting. I told him everything was fine. I became very skilled at lying, which made me feel even worse. One afternoon, about a week after everything happened, Marcus had an evening meeting that would run late. He suggested that Thomas and I go out to dinner together, saying it would be nice for me to get out of the house, and for Thomas to try one of the good restaurants nearby. I wanted to refuse. Every instinct told me that spending more time with Thomas was a terrible idea. But I couldn't give a good reason without raising suspicion, so I agreed. Thomas and I drove to the restaurant in separate cars. We sat at a corner table and a waiter brought us menus. For the first 20 minutes, we barely spoke, but then something changed. Somewhere between the appetizers and the main course, Thomas began talking about his research, about his graduate program, about his plans for the future. He spoke passionately about environmental conservation, about the specific ecosystems he'd be studying, about his hopes for making a meaningful contribution to his field. As I listened to him, I felt something I hadn't allowed myself to feel since that day in the bedroom. Genuine connection and care for him as a person. Not attraction, not that complicated mix of desire and guilt. Just real human interest in who he was and what he cared about. "You're going to do great things," I told him, and I meant it. "You're smart and thoughtful, and you care about things that matter. Your program is lucky to have you." He looked at me across the table, and I saw something like pain in his expression. "I wish I could stop thinking about you," he said quietly. And the rest of the restaurant seemed to fade away. "I wish I could just see you as my father's partner and move forward. But I can't." My throat tightened. "I know," I whispered. "I can't either." "So what do we do?" he asked. "How do we get through the next 2 weeks, and then the rest of our lives?" I didn't have an answer. At least not one I could put into words. The truth was that there was no good answer. We could repeat what happened, but that would only make things worse. We could try to maintain distance, but we'd still be living in the same house, still aware of each other. We could tell Marcus, but that would destroy his relationship with his son, and likely end my relationship with him too. Every option was impossible in its own way. We have to just get through it, I finally said. One day at a time. We remind ourselves why this matters, why he matters, why our integrity matters. Thomas was quiet for a long moment, then nodded. Okay, he said. Okay, we can do that. But even as he said it, I could see he didn't quite believe it. I didn't quite believe it either. The following week was slightly easier, only because we'd established a routine of staying away from each other. We perfected the art of being in separate spaces. When we did have to interact, we kept conversations brief and about surface-level things. I noticed Thomas spending more time on his computer, researching things for his program, making arrangements for his move. I think he was deliberately keeping himself busy, trying to distract himself. I did the same with my work, throwing myself into client projects more intensely than usual. Marcus returned for a long weekend, and his presence felt like a spotlight exposing every lie I'd told. He was affectionate and warm, excited to hear about what Thomas and I had been doing, proud of both of us for getting along so well. I felt physically sick whenever he touched me, whenever he kissed me. His love felt like an accusation, and I constantly wondered how I could appear so normal on the outside while everything inside me felt like it was breaking apart. One night, when Thomas had gone to bed and Marcus and I were in our room, I considered telling him everything. I imagined the words I would say, the way his face would change as he understood, the anger and hurt that would follow. But I couldn't do it. The cost felt too high, not for me, but for him and for Thomas. So I stayed silent. After Marcus left again, I knew something had to change. The tension in the house had become so thick you could feel it, like humidity before a thunderstorm. I could feel it affecting everything. My work, my sleep, my ability to function normally. 2 days before Thomas was scheduled to leave for London, I found him in the backyard. He was sitting on one of the chairs that faced toward the woods, a book open on his lap that he wasn't reading. I sat down in the empty chair beside him. We need to actually talk about this, I said. He turned to look at me, and I could see the toll the past weeks had taken on him. His face looked thinner somehow, more drawn. I don't know what there is to say, he replied. We made a mistake. We've been trying to live with it, but we haven't been living with it, I said. We've been drowning in it, and we still have the rest of our lives to navigate. You're going to London. I'm staying here. Eventually, you'll come back to visit your father, and I'll still be here. This isn't going to go away just because we don't talk about it. He was silent for a long moment, staring at the trees. When I think about what happened, he said slowly, I don't regret the physical part. That probably sounds terrible, but it's honest. What I regret is the betrayal. What I regret is knowing that I hurt my father and that I hurt you by being part of this. I nodded because I understood exactly what he meant. That was the heart of our impossible situation. What had happened felt real and significant in a way that went beyond simple physical desire. And yet it was founded on betrayal and dishonesty. We couldn't celebrate it, or even speak about it with anything other than shame, because it came at the expense of someone we both cared about. I think, I said carefully, that what happened between us was real. I think we connected with each other in a genuine way. But connection isn't the same as doing what's right. And what's right is that we acknowledge what happened, we accept responsibility for it, and then we let it go. How? He asked, turning to face me. How do we let it go? We do it because the alternative is destroying your father. And I won't do that. I love him too much to destroy him. Thomas was quiet for a very long time. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose. Birds were calling to each other, preparing for night. The world was moving on around us, indifferent to our crisis. I'm going to write him a letter, Thomas said finally. Not telling him about us, but telling him how much he means to me. How grateful I am for the opportunity to strengthen our relationship. It won't change what happened, but it might mean something. That's good, I said. I think that's a beautiful idea. We sat together as the light faded, and for the first time since everything had happened, the silence between us wasn't suffocating. It was sad and tinged with a complicated sense of loss. But it wasn't crushing us. We were beginning the process of letting each other go, of accepting that what had happened would remain something we carried separately, rather than something we shared. The last day Thomas spent in the house before leaving for the airport was quiet. He spent the morning finishing his packing. Marcus was working from home that day, handling some tasks for his company. I found myself feeling strangely grateful for Marcus's presence, as though having him there provided a barrier that made everything feel more manageable. We had a simple lunch together, the three of us. Nobody talked much. Thomas seemed focused on the logistics of leaving. Marcus was preoccupied with work. I was trying to process the fact that Thomas was leaving, that this strange, painful chapter was coming to an end. When it was time to leave for the airport, Thomas hugged Marcus first. Father and son embraced, and I could see Marcus holding on a little longer than usual, as if he was trying to remember the feeling of having his son close. I watched them and felt a wave of complicated emotions. Love for both of them, grief for what had happened, gratitude that it hadn't destroyed Marcus's relationship with his son.